Hey, what's going on, everyone? Casey here from Summit Integrated Systems. We've got several people from the Summit team here today to talk to you about the top 5 ways for you to elevate your weekend services. Pretty much everyone on the Summit team has been in a church production role at some point in their lives. We get it, we know what it's like, and that's why I'm so excited for y'all to hear from our team today. So here are the top 5 things that you can do starting today that are gonna elevate your weekend services to the next level.
Keeping vision in front of your whole team and doing it regularly. Our tendency is to forget. And as we kind of, one thing that tension does is say what you were saying before, is like we try to get rid of the tension. And sometimes to get rid of the tension, we forget the vision. At least that's been my experience. And so, keeping the vision in front of people at all levels, I think helps make difficult conversations easier. If I'm trying to have a difficult conversation and it's perceived as like, this is what matters to me, then, sometimes the pushback is, well, I don't care what you like. I'm going to do it this way anyway. If we're having a difficult conversation through the lens of like, hey, this is what is important to us as a church, well, then really it starts to address the core reasons of like, hey, why do you want to be involved in the first place? And it kind of helps kind of unpack that a little bit and go beneath just what do I like and what do I not like, but go down into like, hey, why am I here in the first place? And if I can answer that question, it makes it a lot easier for me to sometimes embrace the tension, right? Because I understand like there's always going to be that tension between what I want and what's actually best for the church.
I think the biggest thing for volunteers is helping them see the bigger picture of the goal of the experience, right? When we're talking about production. If there's a volunteer and all they do is, here's how you use this camera. Here's the buttons to push, here's where to point it. They can do okay with that. When we talk to them or when a tech director talks to them and helps them feel a part of the whole bigger production as to why their position matters, all of a sudden their heart's involved and their mind's involved, and they're able to actually make better decisions in real time as to how this should look. So when there's a lack of vision, that gives the opportunity for volunteers to create their own. So when we can explain the biggest vision of this is what production means to our church or to the video team or to the lighting team or to the audio team, this is how it should sound, this is how it should feel. Man, they can all point in a unified direction, and the outcome is so much greater in that.
Vision is your overarching, and you could also use the word mission potentially, but vision or mission is your overarching, this is what we want to do as a community. The layer below that are goals. How do we take that big vision and start to create some goals around what that looks like? From that goals, create plans, and then you can execute those plans. And I think tech guys tend to live in the, what is our plan? What are we doing today? What is our logistical thing that has to happen? And the pastors tend to operate in vision mission. And so what they need to meet together and say, I hear you saying this. Does that mean you have a goal for us of this? And then let him speak and say, well, no, yes or no. Maybe that is the direction we want to go. But we have to meet in the middle and figure out like, what are our common goals to hit that vision and also get me that logistical planning that I need to be in.
There's a natural just divide, right, between like the stage and the booth. And that is like something that we create a lot of the times. And so, and I'm guilty of it too. I've been in places where there is that divide and it's really difficult to break it. One of the just practical ways that I found to kind of combat some of that is, get your stages on the production side, get your stages set up early. Like, get that stuff done early in the day. Grab a cup of coffee, go to a coffee shop, leave the building. If you need to, just reset before everybody gets there. If you're gonna bridge that gap between the stage and the booth, it's built on relationship. And the only way that you can do that is be a likable person, right? We used to always say that like, if the first time you're communicating with someone at a rehearsal is over the talkback mic, you're doing it wrong.
So how am I actually building relationship with the other people in my world that depend on me? So again, if I were to use the example of an audio guy, it's like, how am I building a relationship with a band on stage? Because, 90% of what I do is going to be like determined by like what's coming off of the stage. So if I'm not able to have a dialogue, if I'm not able to actually have a relationship where they trust me and I trust them, then we're never really going to get the result that we want. How are we actually creating a relationship that allows people to connect, invite feedback, invite, positive, constructive criticism and so on, all so that we can get better at our craft?
I went to coffee every day in one of my TD roles with the worship pastor to say, man, I want to build this relationship. And it was mutual, right? We were becoming friends. But because of that, we didn't have a lot of external conflict, right? We had our spaces to disagree that were over coffee or in his office or whatever. We had this deep relationship, and almost, you can think of it almost like a first team, right? Your first team is your staff team. And so you guys need to be united, because showing a division between the tech guy and the worship guy in front of volunteers shows disunity in the church, right? So I think, again, it's building that relationship intentionally and not just showing up and doing our own thing. Where I have seen the most conflict, even for myself and in others, is when, your worship and your tech folks are not, your staff guys aren't communicating well at all, and that just trickles down into the rest of your teams. And so you have to lead by example in this scenario and really build that relationship, have the conflict, because you're going to have conflict, but have it in a healthy way, by first having a relationship.
In your sanctuary, there's multiple levels of division. I think first off, you have to think about the people that are on stage and the people that are sitting in the audience. That's a clear line of delineation. I mean, there's a stage. Usually it's 30 some inches tall, and ultimately people up there, and there's beautiful lights and sound and whatnot. And there's almost this picture of, well, we've got it all figured out. That's why we're on stage. You guys are in the audience to consume and to hopefully get your hearts right and come to know Jesus. And that's baloney. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is create from a worship experience a moment and a springboard. The reason why we sing the songs that we sing are hopefully that they're a launch pad for someone to start singing their own song and to start to find themselves in a place of where they can express worship to the Lord. And we're all caught up in this collective experience, not just, hey, watch me, I'm really awesome, I've got a super dope voice, or I can shred on the guitar, or my drum solo is super dope. All of those things are tools to try and help create moments for people to worship. If worship is the goal and experience is the goal, then you have to start to look at the unity or disunity between the worship team and the tech team. Because in reality, this dude might be wailing over here and having a really special moment with the Lord. But if someone's not manning the faders and in tune with what's happening in the moment and pushing them up so that they can help be a springboard for the community to move into something else that the Holy Spirit's doing, we've missed it. There's been this us and them, the tech arts folks and the folks up here who are the artists. And ultimately, there's been a lot of tension between those of like, hey, just let us do what we do. And it's like, and they kind of look at each other in that kind of posturing stance. And the truth is when we come together collectively, we can do a lot for the overall gathered community, because it's not us and them, it's we. If worship is the goal and creating an experience where people can come to know Jesus and marriages can be healed and people can, that are really needing hope injected into their heart and they need that worship experience to kind of get them through their week. If that's the goal, then that means we have to fight for unity amongst those two teams and go, what are we creating sonically and visually that will help create an experience for people to do exactly that. It's not us and them, it's we, it's the collective. It's so much more fun when you can go, hey man, let me do what I do and you do what you do, but let's do it together. Like, let's celebrate the fact that we're different. You may not play a guitar, but man, you might know how to work a console like nobody else. Fantastic. Like, celebrate that. That doesn't make you any less than. You're painting an environment with sound and with worship. That to me is a really beautiful gift. And a lot of times tech arts folks find themselves in a place of feeling less than. And that's just simply not true.
One of the biggest things that would help any church, honestly, is planning. I know that that's so simple, but man, the more that you plan during the week, the more relaxed and confident and ready to care for people that you're going to be on the weekend. If you're not like zoned in on your sheet music, right? You're going to be so much more engaged in what's happening in the room. And it's the same thing on the production team. If you like know your lyric sheets, if you know, if you've listened to recordings, and as a sound engineer, you're gonna know what's coming up, and you're gonna be able to ebb and flow.
I think the epidemic in the church TD world is a lack of planning and foresight. Like, I think we are so, and I'll just speak for myself. When I was on staff, I was so in the like Sunday comes every week that I wasn't looking far enough out in a lot of seasons, especially the seasons of VBS and 4th of July events or Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, right? We get so dialed into the 52 weeks a year we're doing church plus these big events that we don't create the space or take the time to really look forward and say, what do we need? You know, this goes into creatives planning out farther, right? You can't pull off a video in 3 days unless you're killing somebody. So, you know, creatives have figured this out for a while to say, well, we need time and space to dream and then execute. The techs need the same thing. We need the time to dream and create time to dream and execute. I told my tech teams a lot, like, we should be doing plumbing in the midweek and we should be doing art on the weekends. And the only way we get to art is if we get the plumbing done first. And so let's get all the base foundational things done ahead of time, whether that's patching the stage, planning the services out, whatever. Get all that done so your volunteers can walk in and really focus on what they're there to do, which is play music, run lyrics, design the lights, whatever.
I think prep is one of the things that's largely ignored, and systems and processes that actually set up people for a win. If you have an expectation of what somebody's going to output or what a service is going to sound like or feel like, then what systems need to exist on the other side of that to support that? It can be simple as like, what's a good sound check structure? You know, what's a good routine for the team on a Sunday morning that is going to make the most use of their time and the least amount of like just sitting around waiting for someone else to do their job, right?
There's kind of this place of, well, the worship team is doing what they're doing. They'll select their songs early Sunday morning, right? Like when they do their little practice, or late Saturday night, which doesn't give time for the tech arts people to go, dude, I can help this and make this better. When it comes to lighting looks, I've seen some lighting setups that look like all they did was put it on, demo mode, and you're like, why? Like, this is a really nice slow song, and it's like lights are going all over the place, and you're like, dude, this is nothing but a distraction, right? If our goal is to try and accentuate what's happening from a worship perspective and to elevate it, then I would think intentionality and planning would be one of those things. And you can over plan too, right? Like you can get it to the point where you're over there just hitting every little cue, and it's like, wait a minute, you're stressed out because these cues are there. I mean, you have to look at this from a step back, artist, worshipful moment. How can we create a really cohesive moment for the people sitting in the seats and for all of us to collectively join in unity and worship? And I think that stepping back, thinking about the weekend, your song selection, and how tech can help facilitate those moments.
Your primary job is not to be fixing gear during the week. Your primary job is to be investing in your team and your people. And then the byproduct of that is an excellent service. We need to make sure that we're investing in them outside of just a rehearsal time, right? Like if you're only spending time with your volunteer teams during rehearsal, you're missing the point.
I mean, I'll talk about some of my mistakes. As a young TD, instead of using every moment for teaching and coaching, I would run over the volunteer to go fix the problem. Maybe it's, my worship leader was up there on stage with a monitor issue and my monitor engineer wasn't really getting it fixed. I would go and, not physically, but, I would go get in front of him, fix it myself, and maybe mumble a word or two to that person instead of saying, cool, here's where we're at. Here's what I think they're asking for. Let's work on this together.
I think another thing that can be so impactful is having hard conversations from a production standpoint, especially relating to volunteers, right? We've got a great heart, but can't hear, can't see, whatever it might be. You miss the subject in the camera a lot. Let's watch this back together and say, you continually cutting his head off. Do you see that? Oh, well, I didn't know. Like they might not know. They might not understand of like, oh, I don't look at the monitor. Okay, let's talk about how like the fundamental pieces of that. And all of a sudden, a couple of few things of pointed direction and help for them can be your best volunteer ever. But it has to start with, this isn't quite meeting the mark we're looking for. And that's scary, but it's beneficial.
So when training volunteers, just remember that they're your greatest asset that you have. Like without them, you can't do what you do. The value needs to be centered around them as people before it has anything to do with what they offer you on your production team. And if you can do that, you'll have the biggest buy-in from your volunteer team.
I think tension always exists, and I think if we just try to get rid of it, it's largely just about like how much money do I have to throw at it to sweep it under the rug. Tension is the one thing that actually helps us grow. Like we cannot grow without tension. So like if you want your people to grow, if you want your teams to grow, like you got to pay, again, Andy Stanley, pay attention to the tension, right? I think tension is always an indicator of where either we're rubbing against the vision. If there's tension, maybe part of it is like we're trying to go in the direction that the church just doesn't want to go, and that they just is not a part of their vision and who they are. Or that tension can point to like a resource issue or a personnel issue, like, hey, maybe we're not equipped with the right team, the right resources, or the right, the bench isn't deep enough for us to be able to do what we want to do.
Something you could do tomorrow, something you could do today. Have the people, whether it's the camera operator, the musician, the pastor, get on the other side of what they're producing. Have the band do a song. They go sit in the pews or in the chairs and listen to it back as the same mix. And they're going to be like, oh, wow, I'm out of tune. Wow, you can't hear me. Or, wow, this seat doesn't sound good. Or, oh, I don't sing on pitch. I could say that from front of house, but it's probably not going to be received well. But if I can get them to experience that and see that usually actually has some change.
So what I don't want to do is discredit like work ethic or anything or excellence or anything like that, because those are all extremely high values, to the God that we serve, and that's amazing. But we need to be really careful that we're not prioritizing our jobs over our family. We serve Christ by serving our families first and foremost, and like we can't do that if we're constantly just stuck in the grind of work. I struggled with that forever, and I still struggle with the idea that like I have to do more to be more, and it's just not. It's not biblical. I am just not convinced that Jesus calls us to sacrifice our family on some made up altar of ministry. I'm not convinced of that. My advice would be, man, go home at 5:00 every night. Just do it. Go home at 5. Find a volunteer to run your event that you've got tonight. Like, you don't have to be at women's Bible study. You've got to get to the point where you value your family over your job.
I feel like I have a lot of energy around stewardship because, at one point in my life, stewardship was literally like wringing myself out to dry to save a couple of bucks. And I would put my health and my mental well-being on the line for the sake of, saving money. And I think if we only think of stewardship in terms of finances, again, I feel like that's only half the picture. It's a stewardship of people as well as finances.
When it comes to tech and creative arts, there's a lot of, it's a thankless position. It's often overlooked, and unless something's breaking or some terrible, something happens in the middle of the service, everybody turns around and looks at the booth. I think there is this overall weight that those people carry that are in the tech arts. And I just want people to know that we see you. We're thankful for them. We're thankful for the energy that they put in every single weekend. They are molding and shaping environments for people to experience Jesus. I do not take that lightly. I'm so intrigued and encouraged by what I see in the body of Christ right now with the way in which people are using technology to try and help people find some hope in a season where there's not a lot of hope. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of frustration. But week in, week out, people are showing up, putting in effort, putting in energy, and I'm just grateful. grateful for what they do. I'm grateful for the way in which they continue to work on their skills and their craft, and the fact that they're at this conference going, hey man, I want to learn. I want to grow. That to me is huge. Never, ever, ever stop learning. Never, ever, ever stop growing. None of us have ever arrived. We are not perfect. Not until we are absent from this body and we are present with the Lord will we be perfect. There's always something for us to learn. There's always something for us to grow in. And the fact that they're here right now says a lot about the character and the nature about who they really are. And awesome people that do incredible things that help people find Jesus and experience his love. I'm eternally grateful for that.